Brian Flores' defense is probably going to look a lot different this year, and the key is one guy, Jonathan Greenard. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. Week 1 of the 2024 NFL season is upon us. So welcome in, everybody. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers who listen to this show every single day. And welcome into anybody who's new, who's just tuning in now because the Viking season's about to start. You're looking to get caught up on what's going on. You've come to the right place. My name is Luke. I'll be your host, and you can find Locked On Vikings Monday through Friday, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, including SiriusXM, where you'll be able to also find live broadcasts, hometown broadcasts of Vikings games. Just search out Vikings or search out Locked On Vikings if you want to listen to the show there. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. On today's show, I wanted to start by previewing the Vikings defense, not trying to predict yardage totals or anything like that, but by telling you exactly what I think is going to be different from last year and the dynamic of those things. But really, this is going to become an episode about Jonathan Greenard. The key is going to be there. If Jonathan Greenard plays well, does his thing, I think this whole thing is going to be set up to really maximize him. And it makes sense. I mean, he's probably the premier free agent that the Vikings brought in in the offseason. He's the guy that's basically de facto traded with Danielle Hunter for the Texans. That's just how free agency worked out. It wasn't a literal trade, but that's how it happened. And he's also the last guy on the list for the Everyman Series. If you are new here, that's what we did all summer. We talked about the backstories for each new Minnesota Viking, everybody who joined the team at least before training camp. Some of the guys that got in training camp we didn't get to, but we got some of the guys that came in after training camp started. But everybody who got before training camp we have gotten to, except for Jonathan Greenard. So we're going to tell his story as well. But first, on field. Okay, Brian Flores defense, right? All of the coverage stuff, I don't really know what we're going to see coverage-wise, to be honest, out of the Brian Flores defense. Last year, they kind of made a living on doing something that's a little bit messed up, a little bit off the beaten path, we'll say. An idea that principally you typically can't do. It's like making dinner with cheese and fish and making it work. But instead of cheese and fish, Brian Flores made blitzing and zone coverage work. Typically, you can't do that. You can't have, 6 people blitzing and then try to do zone coverage with 5 guys. There's going to be too many holes on the field, right? And there are always going to be holes on the field in the Brian Flores defense when he's blitzing. There's no way to have, 5 people in coverage and cover everything. But having them try to break up the field into zones is insane. But the way that he did it essentially took some ideas from Pat Narduzzi at Pitt and Michigan State before that, took some ideas from, the Bill Belichick defenses, some ideas from Steelers defenses, and melded them all together in a way that worked for a while. But the holes that it left, it's just impossible not to have them, eventually got exploited really hard. The Bengals took advantage. The Lions took advantage twice. The Packers took advantage. The Vikings dropped 4 games in a row to end the season. That's where we left things off. Whether or not they're going to go back to man coverage depends a lot on how much faith they have in Stephon Gilmore, in Shaq Griffin, in Byron Murphy, and in the guys in the depth, right? Fabian Moreau, Caleb Evans. But so I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm actually super curious to see what sort of coverages we see against the Giants, who now have Malik Neighbors they're really excited about, and presumably will try to throw the ball on a weak-looking Viking secondary. How much are you going to ask those corners to do? The real, I think, clear move that I can predict is the way they're going to construct their pass rushes, whether they're 4-man rushes or blitzes, the actual construction of those. So how is an NFL pass rush created, right? So I think there's a misconception that a lot of people have. If you've never really thought about it before, you go, well, I don't know. You got 4 people. You just go rush the passer, right? Like go try to sack the quarterback. That's the move. You're up against a lineman, do a move on him. And that's not typically the way that it works. So at the simplest level, we're talking youth football, we're talking high school football. You assign each pass rusher a gap, and you fill as many gaps as you can, and you hope somebody gets through that gap. And once you get a little bit more complex, you'll see you're not necessarily always trying to get an unblocked rusher. You want to set up quality one-on-ones is, I guess, the way you'll put it. So that maybe the simplest example of this is, let's say you have Jonathan Greenard on the left side of the defense and everybody else to his right. And we'll have everybody slant to the right to try to force the offense into sliding their protection that way. And force a bunch of offensive linemen to go to the right, except for the tackle, who will stay home and block Jonathan Greenard. But now you've moved all of his help away from him, and he can either go to the outside or to the inside of that tackle. He'll have room to do that. That's called a two-way go, and that's the most advantageous thing. Now, if you watched last year, the pass rushes, they were all constructed to give that two-way go, or for the most part, to Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter was the focal point of all of it. And everybody else was kind of sacrificial, right? Harrison Phillips never had the two-way go. You would never give him the option of going inside or outside. He had a shoulder, he would go attack. His job was mostly, hey, if you get the center to turn his shoulders the way we want, you did your job. It's what a lot of D tackles do in pass pro, and it's why, or in pass rush, and it's why pass rush stats for D tackles isn't something that really changes the world for a lot of people, unless you're Dexter Lawrence and you can be the guy that you give a two-way go to, but that's pretty rare. Really, you're trying to get those edge rushers set up, but it was always Danielle Hunter. These Vikings are a little more balanced. They have Jonathan Greenard, they have Van Ginkel. We'll see what they get out of Dallas Turner, their first-round pick. He's very exciting. Looked awesome in the preseason, by the way, and by all accounts, looked really good in camp as well. So a lot of optimism surrounding him, but we'll see what happens when the bullets really fly. They got Evan Neal, Andrew Thomas over there in New York. I don't know which is going to be against who, but that will be another very interesting decision. Brian Flores doesn't do the Mike Zimmer thing where one guy goes up against the same tackle all day long. And then they can, set up a long game and do this pass rush move a whole bunch of times to try to set up a moment where they do the counter to it. On a key third down. That was the way that Danielle Hunter did so many great things under Mike Zimmer. Brian Flores does it a little different. You're going to move guys around. You're never going to get the same guy twice. You're never going to get the same look twice. And that can create confusion in a different way. Definitely just two different ways to bite the same apple. But if I had to guess, somebody like Van Ginkel is here to be a versatile player, maybe drop into coverage on sim pressures and do all this stuff. Somebody like Dallas Turner also did the same at Alabama. So that's the kind of thing they're looking for. For Greenard, hand in the dirt pass rusher Jonathan Greenard, who just, for example, last year, 8 coverage snaps, right? Like this dude is pass rusher. This might all be set up to get him a lot of two-way goes. And ideal world, right? With a blitz, you get an unblocked rusher. That's always great. We love getting unblocked rushers, but I mean, come on. We understand that that's not going to happen every single time you blitz. So a blitz that gives Jonathan Greenard a chance against somebody, for example, let's say Evan Neal, who, if you ask Giants fans, they're not too happy with, get him a two-way go against a tackle that you perceive as a matchup he can win. That could be part of the plan. And guess what? If all you're trying to do is get a one-on-one, but an advantageous one versus trying to get a whole unblocked guy, you can maybe relax a little bit on the super suspect zone coverages. And if you trust Turner or Van Ginkel enough to also be that guy, you can then subvert if the offense starts to slide things toward Greenard and take that away from you forcibly. That's, I think, the idea behind these pass rushes. So when you watch the pass rush, especially if you're somebody that likes to go on NFL Plus and do the all 22, and you can see from the end zone, so you can see very clearly which gap everybody is in. You can go, okay, who could have gone either way? When if Harrison Phillips is in his gap and there's a guy in the gap to the left and the right of his gap, clearly Harrison Phillips was only supposed to rush that gap. And if that gap was covered by the slide or whatever, he's just pushing the pocket. There's no chance he's getting the sack, and that's the point. He's going to be sacrificial and just occupy space. But who had that? That'll be an interesting thing to kind of pay attention to and track. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to chart or that anybody charts, but it's an interesting idea. And it all comes down to just how much they faith they have in a guy like Jonathan Greenard to replace the production of a guy like Danielle Hunter. But to understand Jonathan Greenard, we got to go all the way back to Hiram, Georgia in 2009. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. So I just used Gametime to find tickets to Vikings-Jags that I got for, before fees, $225 a pop, lower deck Vikings-Jags tickets. I tried to take them up on their Gametime guarantee, where if you find the same section and row for less, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Utterly failed that. Absolutely the best deal on the market. So I'm very excited to get the deal I got. And then I flicked on their all-in pricing, which is a switch you can turn on that tells you what you will pay at checkout to make sure that they're not just like smoking you with hidden fees. $300 a pop. After all, after fees, taxes, all of that stuff, still the best deal I could find anywhere. So go to Gametime if you're trying to get tickets to Vikings games, or maybe you just want to spontaneously go to a Twins game and you're looking for tickets. Last minute tickets is what Gametime does best. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is also brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy made easy. So if you've been trying to get into therapy, but maybe you're struggling to find a time that works with your schedule, or maybe you're just apprehensive about an experience that maybe you had in the past with therapy. Here's the thing. A lot of therapists are different. So if you had a bad experience with a therapist in the past, the next one you get might be totally night and day. And BetterHelp is there to help you try to navigate that world and set you up with somebody that they think is right for you. And if you don't like that person, you can switch at no additional cost. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. And you can set that up at whatever time is convenient for you, whether it's just via call or video chat. You don't have to go to a separate office in the middle of your workday and make it totally impossible. BetterHelp is going to try to make that work for you. Once again, that is betterhelp.com/lockedon. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thanks a whole bunch for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NFL. It's different than it used to be. For the last many, many, many years, now you've got an AM and a PM. AM is Tyler Rowland. He does Locked On Titans. He's completely insane. And if you want something a little more chill, you can get Tony Wiggins at night. And by the way, Wednesday mornings, I'll be on with Tyler the Madman Rowland. So go check us out on Locked On NFL. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, you'll be able to find it there as well. Now I want to take you to Hiram, Georgia, where Jonathan Greenard grew up. His mother, Carmen Greenard-Varner, watching her son on a football field. Her husband, Washington, is seeing this for the first time. That's Jonathan's stepfather. It's 2009. Jonathan Greenard's about 12 years old. And on the first play, he gets the ball, he bobs, he weaves, and he runs by all the kids for an 89-yard touchdown. First play, first time he touches the ball. How do you like that, stepdad? It was pretty clear from an early age that Jonathan Greenard would be good at football. He was watching film with his biological father since he was 5 years old. And this was just the introduction for stepdad to it. And he gets into the end zone. Everybody's celebrating, kids going crazy. I'm sure the parents are going crazy. Yaks right on the end zone. Boom, food comes right up. Apparently he had too much food before the game. All that running, threw it right up. Now for a 12-year-old, it would be perfectly understandable if that was the end of your day. Coach, I feel sick. I'm spooked. I just threw up. I'm done. I scored a touchdown. I'm happy I did it. But no, not for Jonathan Greenard, who gets the ball again on the very next drive and takes it 75 yards for a touchdown. Just dominating these poor kids that are just like way lesser athletes. But I guess they'll all get to grow up and be like, yeah, see that NFL player? I played with him when I was 12. He scored on us and threw up in the end zone. So look, we've got something going here in Hiram, Georgia. And through high school, Hiram's coaches love young Jonathan. He's a grinder. He's a workhorse. Oh, he's the best kid I ever coached. You see these quotes everywhere in all of these stories. And he was popular. He was homecoming king. He was leader on the football team. And he was very popular with colleges. On college visits, he had his pick of the litter. He had Georgia came a-calling. He had Kentucky. He had Louisville. Missouri made a late push. It was much too late for Missouri, but like they made a huge sell. And on these college visits, he would like quiz the colleges on how much they knew about like their math and science programs. Or they'd be like, he'd be like, what? So when did this school start accepting black students? Like to try to get a sense for, I guess, just like what kind of people would be running the program. Because he'd be asking like coaches this or like recruiters, people in the football program. Much to the chagrin of his mom, who's on all these visits, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we're on the campus of the Georgia Bulldogs. What are you doing? You're going to scare them off. But she would eventually come around and see kind of that he was trying to get a place that he could feel comfortable and a place that he could call home. And he would eventually land on Kentucky. Right before his senior year of high school, he's getting ready to commit. And around that time, Jonathan Greenard's biological father would pass away. And the funeral would be a costly thing. They didn't have any life insurance or anything like that. And the Greenard family, I guess the Greenard-Varnum family, wasn't exactly flush with cash. So things would be pretty tight around this time. But they were talking to Kentucky, and they said, come down to this camp, and you can commit there. And that's going to be the plan here. You're going to come to the University of Kentucky and commit right, there in person to the coaches after this like summer camp that we're having right before Jonathan Greenard's senior year of high school. And so they scrounge together what they can. And it's very much like we spent our last dollar on this, we got to do it kind of deal. I like the way that one of the previous Everyman Series entries put it. Somebody's mom said, yeah, we're sports poor. We've got a little money, but we kind of only ever get to spend it on sports. But he goes to Kentucky, and they're about to like meet a staffer. And they're like, okay, yeah, just wait here. They'll be out in a second. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And after a little while, Jonathan's mom gets a bad feeling. And Jonathan's a little bit young and naive and excited to be at college, so he doesn't get it. But like in hindsight, he's like, yeah, that was weird. But it takes like a half hour for somebody to come out and meet them. And then after the camp, he goes up to the coach. He says, I would like to commit to the Kentucky Wildcats. And they say, yeah, okay, that's great. But why don't you hold off on that a little bit? Because we actually got a couple players coming later, and we don't know which one of your commitments you're going to take. So they're like running a little late. They're going to be here, and then we'll decide. And it's like just heart through floor. Just like, what? Are you kidding me? So they're all furious about this, and he'll leave campus without committing. He'll say, like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you knew how much this, like how hard it was for us to get here. You knew the financial situation. You really weren't going to tell us that you weren't even sure about our commitment before you made us come all the way over here. So they were furious. I should mention that in the Athletic article that I sourced that information from, they reached out to the University of Kentucky for comment, and they got a no comment from Kentucky. But regardless, that same weekend, they get a call from Louisville's defensive coordinator. Word must travel very fast, because Louisville's defensive coordinator is like, hey, we hear you're around town. You want to come to Lexington? We got a football camp coming on. What do you think? So here's the rub. They got $50 left. I'm not kidding. $50 in their pocket. It's just enough for the gas to get home. If they go to Lexington, that won't be enough anymore. Like, they are that tight. But the idea of going to Kentucky has just gone out the window. And this is another opportunity. And at this point, you're late in the recruitment process. What other opportunities are still left? These scholarships are starting to get picked clean. So they call a family friend. They say, can I borrow $100? Sure. Okay. You can borrow $100. That's enough to get there and back. They go to Louisville, and that's where Greenard would end up committing. But there is something very powerful to think about, that Jonathan Greenard's career, which has already featured its fair share of storied moments, was $100 away from never happening at all. The recruiting trail is a very weird place where a lot of stuff that's outside of your control can completely ruin everything. But once Greenard got to Louisville, again, that incredibly motivated, high motor kid just explodes, especially when it's time to play Kentucky. He's mad at those games. He gets up different for those games. His senior year, this would be 2018 by now, his senior year there at Louisville is when he was really starting to think, okay, I'm preparing for an NFL declaration here. Like I'm preparing to try to go pro. And he's kind of understanding that he's of the caliber where that's worth it. But that's the year where things start going wrong. And a lot of things are going to go wrong very fast. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks, the best place to play daily fantasy sports is PrizePicks, where all you got to do is pick a few players, whether they will do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. Mash them all together for a bigger pay. You can get up to 100 times your money for just getting 4 correct answers. And so here's the thing. They're not very good at setting the more than less than numbers. You can find some really ridiculous ones out there. So I super encourage that you go to prizepicks.com and see what it is there that you like. They also just have straight up like free promos, like one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. So all he has to do is get a singular passing yard, which I know it's the Bears, but still 4 weeks of free W's. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. It's September 1st, 2018. 6 years and a day ago on the day this pod comes out. Where Alabama, as it is wont to do around this time, lays a week 1 whooping on somebody, 51-14 against Louisville. This is a game that most people probably forgot, but it's going to change the course of things for Greenard quite a bit. Jonathan Greenard will hurt his wrist in this game, and it'll end up costing him the rest of that season. And with it go any dream of declaring for the draft that year. You can't miss your entire senior season and then go declare for the draft. Like, you ain't getting drafted. And if you are, you're getting drafted way lower than you should. Way smarter to take a couple extra classes, finish up your degree, and go grad transfer somewhere. So that's what Jonathan Greenard does while his wrist gets better. He gets his degree, and he decides he's going to go somewhere else in the SEC. It'll end up being Florida. And this is very cute because Jonathan Greenard grew up a Florida Gators fan in Georgia, in Bulldog country. He grew up diehard Gators fan. You can still see tweets of his from 2012 that are all like go Gators. It helped too that Louisville fired their coach at the end of that 2018 season. So there was like a new coaching change coming in and all that. So it was like this very amicable, parting of the ways. Thank you for everything. Got my degree with you, gave you 3 good years of play. Thank you for everything, Louisville. No hard feelings. I'm going to go grad transfer to a big program in Florida. And this is a good Florida year too. Like, they were 6th ranked at the beginning of that year. And if you search hard enough, you can see a pic of middle school aged Greenard wearing a Florida leather jacket that his mom got him as a gift in around that time. That like all of his friends started posting when it came out that he was going to go to Florida. They all started like posting that, like, look at this kid in his blunder years. It's very cute. He will pop off at Florida, by the way, and he'll get up especially for that Bulldogs game because all those kids that made fun of him, because this is one of those guys that plays well out of spite. And he'll play incredible season there, and it'll be good enough for him to get drafted by the Houston Texans. But amidst that pre-draft process, things get unprecedented. COVID hits. This is 2020 now. And it changes everything about that draft process and messes so many things up for so many people, but it has a different effect on everybody. We are at the point in the like post-COVID timeline where the Everyman Series, every single one of these stories has its COVID chapter. And Greenard's is devastating. There's no other way to put it. His mom, his stepdad, and his brother will get COVID that winter. And you got to remember that winter, that 2020 winter, there was no vaccine yet. We still didn't really quite understand the ins and outs of COVID and the spread of COVID. The summer had lulled everybody into a false sense of security as cases had gone down. Everyone went home for the holidays and then it exploded again. And his mom and his stepdad who get it, particularly they get it bad. They both have tons of complications. His mom recovers, but his stepdad won't recover so easily. It'll start, he's in the hospital and Jonathan's calling him every day and texting him all the time. And then talking is taking too much oxygen. So we got to just text. And then before we know it, ventilator. And then in a taxi on the way home from the airport, he gets a call from his mom. We're pulling the plug. He's stagnated. He's not getting better. We could keep him on a machine for as long as we want, but this is kind of where it ends. And so for the second time in 5 years, I think that would be, a father figure passes away. And his mom barely gets out of this too. He almost lost both of them. His rookie season goes fine. He actually makes his rookie debut in 2020 against the Vikings in week 4. The first game the Vikings won that year. But it makes the 2021 season particularly charged for Greenard. Because if you remember the 2021 season and the way that COVID affected that was like the vax year, the year that there was different rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated players, that it became a whole controversy, that a ton of players spoke out against it. At the epicenter of it was Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. And his whole like immunization thing, like it was this whole thing. It was very politically charged, very politicized thing, but it was ultimately a public health thing that had been sort of hijacked by the political machine of the day and age we live in. And when the new protocols were announced that said that there were going to be different rules if you were unvaccinated, a ton of players tweeted about it, got angry about it, spoke out against it. And Greenard, who was just a few months off of losing his stepfather and almost losing his mother to this, he had to speak. He had to come out and say something. And he gave a statement about public health and about, not letting yourself get kind of tricked by a whole bunch of BS that's out there. And really his main point, though, was like, look, I was hesitant about it until my family got COVID, and then I got it. That was the lesson that he learned. And he said, please don't learn it the hard way like I did. Go get it. And he kind of he sort of went against the flow of a lot of what was going on there. Now, a lot of players had a lot of different things to say all over the spectrum there, and Greenard was just one of them. But if you look up Jonathan Greenard's time with the Texans, if you look at articles about him during that span of 2020 to 2023, that's the biggest story. That is like the thing that he did in Houston that got the most press. Not 23 sacks, not the pick six in the infamous Lovey refuses to tank game at the end of 2022 where the Houston Texans won and it ended up costing them the first overall pick, but they got CJ Stroud. It's that in a moment of grief, he decided to weigh in on the controversy of the hour, and that was the big thing. But he loves to fight when people are against him. He always played hardest against Kentucky when he was at Louisville. He played the hardest, in that Georgia game when he was a Gator. He always played hard for against people who doubt him. So talk all the smack you want about him. See what it makes him do. if you like stuff like this, if you liked this particular show and you're new, you're just showing up for the season and you listen to this, you're like, you really enjoy it. I strongly encourage you to go through the summer. We did basically only this all summer long. Tons of stories like this for all of the new Minnesota Vikings, guys who did make the team, didn't make the team. You can go find it. So go back through and catch up on some of those. Twitter Tuesday is tomorrow, so get your questions in via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or in the Google form in the show notes, or you can just hit me on Twitter. I'll put out a call on Monday. I will see you all for that, and as always, Skull.